After years of deadlock, Albania, a small Western Balkan country, might finally be the one to break the EU's enlargement fatigue. Since officially beginning accession negotiations in 2024, the country has moved at remarkable speed. And this week it was announced that Albania is opening its fifth and final negotiation cluster, marking the fastest progress ever recorded among the Western Balkan states. To put that into perspective, Montenegro, the previous frontrunner, has also opened all of its chapters, but it's been negotiating since 2012. That's 13 years of talks, meaning it took Montenegro about 12 times longer to reach the same stage that Albania has reached in just a year and a bit. All of this makes Edi Rama's plan to close negotiations by 2027 and join the EU by 2030 look increasingly realistic. So in this video, we're going to explore why Albania is now the most likely candidate to become the EU's next member, and what challenges still lie ahead. We've just released a new coffee table book called Assembly Required, which runs through the stories behind some of the world's most beautiful parliament buildings. It's 300 pages long, features hundreds of photos as well as custom designed floor plans and maps, all alongside the stories of each building written by our team. Find out more and pick up a copy by clicking the link in the description. Let's start with some context. After decades of isolation and communist rule, at the turn of the century, Albania turned westwards. It's since become arguably the most pro-EU country in the region, with around 90% of Albania's population supporting the idea of accession, the highest rate among all the Western Balkan countries. In 2009, Albania submitted its formal application and was granted membership status 5 years later under the leadership of Edi Rama and his Socialist Party. Unfortunately for Albania, negotiations have been slow, and several member states, notably France and the Netherlands, have blocked advancing negotiations multiple times. Now, this is partly because states like France worry that the EU simply doesn't have the bandwidth to admit new members, but it's also because many member states weren't happy with Albania's corruption and crime problems. The Albanian mafia is generally regarded as one of the most powerful and influential narco-crime rings in Europe, equalled perhaps only by their Italian counterparts in Italy, and has been linked to rising gang-related violence across parts of northern Europe. At home, these criminal networks have managed to exert significant influence over politics, acting as kingmakers by manipulating votes, financing campaigns, intimidating opponents, and capturing state institutions. Their reach has severely undermined Albania's judiciary and contributed to broader concerns about the rule of law. As such, for a long time, many in the EU couldn't imagine Albania actually becoming a part of the bloc. Furthermore, Albania's membership had been hurt by the fact that the EU linked its bid to North Macedonia's. While North Macedonia originally made quick progress, a dispute with Bulgaria over minority rights resulted in Bulgaria essentially vetoing its application and stalling both bids. However, in 2024, the EU agreed to decouple Albania's bid from North Macedonia, paving the way for chapter negotiations. Since then, negotiations have moved at an incredibly fast pace, with the EU agreeing to open all 5 clusters with all 33 chapters in just under a year. While the country has yet to close these chapters, this progress is unprecedented. So, how did this happen? Well, first, the EU has become increasingly satisfied with Albania's progress on tackling organised crime and reforming its judiciary. The creation of an anti-corruption agency called SPAK in 2019 has been especially significant, and it's since gone on to prosecute a number of high-level officials. It's become one of the most trusted institutions in the country, and earned praise from the EU for its cooperation against drug trafficking networks. Second, Rama has aligned Albania's foreign policy very closely with that of the EU, something that has become increasingly important as the bloc contends with Russian influence and with relatively pro-Russia member states, which have used their veto power to stall key legislation. In this context, Albania is seen as a relatively unproblematic partner, a country that could join the EU without creating major political headaches, and even act as a counterbalance to Serbia's Russia-leading influence in the region. Finally, Albania has been pretty happy to help the EU with migration control. Under a landmark deal with Italy, Albania was set to become the first non-EU country to process asylum applications for an EU member state. Although the plan later hit legal obstacles, Rama defended it as Albania choosing to act like an EU member state and agreeing to share a burden that Europe should face united. Rama has also used some unorthodox methods to speed up the negotiation process, including using AI to translate more than 280,000 pages of EU legislation into Albanian, and pinpoint where Albania's legal system needs reform to align with the EU's acquis. At the same time, Rama has significantly strengthened his diplomatic profile. Over the past year, he has, somewhat unexpectedly, become a bit of an EU darling. Sporting his trademark white trainers, he's made headlines more than once, from playfully teasing Donald Trump alongside French President Emmanuel Macron over the US president's confusion about a non-existent war between Albania and Azerbaijan, and dropping to one knee when he meets Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, who has become Rama's strongest ally in the EU. He's also leaned heavily on humour to make Albania's case for EU membership, multiple times likening Albania to a jilted lover waiting for the EU at the altar. More recently, he even tried his hand at some slightly darker humour, joking that there is no escape from Albania, better they get us in because we'll stalk them to the end. Albania's EU accession now looks increasingly likely. While the EU could still decide it's not ready, there have been discussions about allowing new members to join without full voting rights, effectively creating a multi-tier Europe. Rama is reportedly more than happy with this arrangement, and has even suggested letting the Italian European Commissioner represent Albania. However, changing these rules would require unanimous approval across the EU, a significant challenge. Even if that hurdle is cleared, rampant corruption in Albania remains a major issue, widely regarded by Albanians themselves as the primary barrier to EU accession. Recently, Rama responded to these concerns by appointing a new anti-corruption minister to oversee procurement processes. However, the fact that this minister was an AI interface drew outrage from the opposition, who argued that AI cannot uphold democratic accountability and accused it of being more likely to cover up corruption than expose it. What's more, until recently, the anti-corruption agency SPAK mostly targeted opposition lawmakers, but it's begun investigating allies of Rama's government, which reflects poorly on Rama and his agenda. In February, the socialist mayor of Tirana and possible successor to Rama was arrested for allegedly laundering developer funds through NGOs. A Socialist Party deputy was also charged with witness tampering, and a former Socialist MP allegedly shared police information with a crime boss during elections. Then this month, SPAK opened a corruption investigation into Albania's Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Infrastructure for breaking public tender rules. All this could pose a major problem for Rama. Although he was re-elected in May on a platform promising EU accession, giving him, in theory, 4 more years to push reforms, if these sorts of corruption cases against his officials continue and anti-government protests flare, like they did last October, Rama's big EU plans could be derailed. When a story like this breaks, the headlines aren't just fast, they're fragmented. Depending on where you get your news, you might be seeing a completely different version of the same event. But if we take a look right now using Ground News, we can see that there are 38 sources reporting on this story about the EU Western Balkan Summit in Albania this October, with most of the coverage coming from the centre. If we dive a bit deeper, we can see that the left is evoking negative tones and tensions between countries like simmering Serbia-Kosovo disputes, whilst the right employs a positive rhetoric celebrating cooperation and reforms. We're able to get such a detailed analysis thanks to our sponsor this week, Ground News. If you're overwhelmed by the amount of outlets and stories that you're seeing online, Ground News has the solution for you, as they expertly collect and merge thousands of articles into one easy-to-access place, finally giving you an effortless way to consume news and digest media bias. And it doesn't even end there. Ground News offers you comprehensive breakdowns into the ownership, bias distribution and factuality of each article, allowing you to dive even deeper into every story. For example, if you're worried about how much you can trust what's being said about a certain event, with a click of a button, you can filter and sort every story by their factuality level, helping you to easily grasp the reliability of each outlet. It's not just the stories we see that shape the narrative, it's the ones we don't. Ground News' blind spot feed is the only feature that shows stories being ignored by one side of the political spectrum, helping you break out of your bubble and spot what you might have missed. To give you an idea, here we can see this story on Lukoil's Finnish petrol stations shutting down over US sanctions, which would have been completely buried if you lean left, as it's mostly being reported by right-leaning outlets. Ground News doesn't just feed you stories based on your algorithm, it allows you to see everything the other side might not want you to. That's why we're partnering with them to offer you 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. All you have to do is subscribe through the link in the description, go to ground.news/TLTR or scan the QR code on screen, and you'll be supporting an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.